Alright, greetings well met and welcome back for our breakdown of Rise of the Ranger, written by author Philip C. Quaintrell, and we are on part 4 today. And it's going to be a good one, because today we're going to find out what the mission is that Galanor and his crew were sent to Dragorn for. We're going to find out what the king wants from Asher, the king of Velia. There's like 4 or 5 kings, but the king of Velia, you're going to find out what he wants from Asher finally. And we're also going to see the elves land in Iliad on the human shores. They are finally going to complete their journey, and we'll see how that pans out. Nathaniel, Elaith, and Asher have finally arrived in Velia to turn over Asher to the king, who has a request/job for the ranger, former Arakesh assassin, Asher. And right away, they're met by Darius de Vale and like 6 other Greycoats. Now, Darius de Vale is the next in line to more or less be Marshal, Grand Marshal, I should say, of the Greycoats. He is long blonde hair with muscles, and everything he does is perfect. You know, he's the golden boy of the Greycoat. But Nathaniel, he's kind of looking out for Asher here, because as they're approaching his fellow Greycoats, like under his breath, he kind of tells Asher, he's like, look man, like, you know that the Greycoats, after you're done doing whatever it is that King Rengar wants you to do, they're gonna take you into custody and they're gonna like torture you for information on Nightfall, the Arakesh. And Asher's like looking at him, he counts like 7 of them, he's like, nah, we'll be good, we'll be fine. And Nathaniel, he's like, yeah, of course I'll be fine. I know I'm good. I'm part of the order, but you, man, you're gonna get, some bad things are gonna happen. But Asher ain't worried about it. He's just not worried about it. When they approach Darius, he instantly starts giving Nathaniel some shit. He starts like insulting him. He's like, oh man, so he just came willingly. I bet you didn't have to fight him. You didn't have to do any real Greycoat work. He just came willingly, kind of thing. And Asher picks up on this vibe, man. Asher gets what's going on here. He heard a little bit of Nathaniel's story, and now he sees the dynamic. They're all just picking on him, and he's looking at Nathaniel, and Nathaniel's just shying away from it. He's not defending himself, nothing. So Asher gets irritated. So when they ask for his weapons, Asher pretty much gets right up in Darius de Vale's face. He's like, what happens if I don't give you my weapons? What are you gonna do about that? Now keep in mind, the Greycoats, their entire order, for as long as they have been in order, have been plagued with rumors about the Arakesh, the Nightfall organization of assassins, which pretty much no Greycoat can beat any Arakesh. 1 for 1, it's not happening, bro. It's not happening. So Asher's like the boogeyman to them. And when Asher steps quick and gets in Darius's face, everybody goes silent, and Darius even steps over his words a bit. He kind of stumbles, and it's great because Nathaniel, he picks up on everything that's happening here. He's not dull. And he sees that this is a perfect opportunity for him to show a little bit of dominance. And Nathaniel, seeing that Darius is stumbling here, he's like, Asher, give him your weapons. They'll be fine. I got you, pretty much. And Asher at this point just backs down nice and calmly. He's like, all right, Nathaniel, I'll give you my weapons. And that's like a backhanded insult to Darius. It's subtle, but it's very potent at the same time. Unfortunately, though, Darius does get the last laugh of this conversation, because he turns to Nathaniel and he informs him that Nathaniel and his ward, Elaith, are to simply head back to Westphalian, their base of operations, and receive further orders, while Darius and his crew take on the further mission of assisting Asher in whatever it is the king needs from him. And the actual mission Nathaniel was sent on to begin with, to retrieve Asher, was thought of as a suicide mission. Asher is the only former Arakesh in existence. Nobody else has ever left except for him. And to forcibly bring him in is a suicide mission. So whether or not he came willingly, Nathaniel completed this mission and he should get to see it through. But they're just going to send him back to base. And right here, the book takes us on a real quick side passage where we see Galanor and his crew off in Dragorn on more or less the rooftops of the city, about to execute the next part of their plan. And if you recall, they need 3 human children and 2, quote, beautiful human women for passage or payment to the mermen so that they can get passage to Cor Cannith from where they're at in Dragorn. And they want to buy these. Well, Galanor wants to buy more or less the women and children. He thinks he can go to one of the 4 or 5 crime families in Dragorn and just buy them. So that's what he does. He organizes a meeting, goes into like one of the brothels, and he sits down with one of their consultants and more or less says, I need, 3 children, 2 beautiful women. And the guy's like, we don't sell people. You're not in the southern lands. We don't do slavery here. And Galanor is like, what a hypocrite. He's thinking in his head, like, what a hypocrite. This guy literally will manipulate people to work in brothels under threat of their life, but he doesn't consider that slavery and he won't sell them. But that doesn't work out for him, and his whole crew thinks this thing is pointless. Galanor is the only person that's trying to do this without conflict. Everybody else is like, let's just kidnap him, and Galanor's like, no man, that'll cause too much of a ruckus. They're like, we don't care, we're here for a mission, elves, we go to war. And he's like, geez, chill, no, I'm the leader here and this is how we do it. But that plan does not pan out. He ends up having to take off, and they're upset with their leader, but they can't really vocalize it because he is the leader. But that's the quick little segment with him. And now we pass back to Asher, where the master of servants is more or less telling Asher, you ain't not meeting with the king until you take a shower and change your clothes, because he's a ranger of the wilds, man. He smells like the wilds. He's got grunge on his grunge, you know what I'm saying? He's a wild man. He's unshaven and jazz. So pretty much Asher's like, I ain't doing it, man. I'm just going to meet the king how I am. Forget all that. And the servant presents 3 good-looking women, and he's like, I think you should really take a bath. And Asher's like, okay, you have convinced me. But then it's the typical scene change where they're literally just scrubbing the hell out of him, rough-ass brushes, and just, not what he had in mind at all. So they play out that little joke real quick before they get over to the actual request of King Rengar himself, which you proceed to find out that the request that King Rengar wants is he needs Asher to escort the ambassador of elves that is coming to Velia from the coast where they land to the city where he resides, because he has heard word that someone has taken out a contract with Nightfall, the Arakesh, to assassinate the envoy, the ambassador, which we know is Reyna, the princess, along with her 2 guardians. And so he needs Asher, somebody who he knows has a background with the Arakesh, to more or less go along with the other Greycoats that he's sending and provide protection detail to make sure that Reyna and her guardians make it to Velia and they're not assassinated before they could get there. Because this is a big flex for him. There's like 5 kingdoms, and they've chosen to land on his. So he's going to hold a big old banquet and flex that on everybody else. But if they die before they get there, that's also kind of on him. So he needs Asher to protect the contingency. And it's, he's like, pretty much tells Asher, like, name your price, bro. Like, just name it. I got you. And Asher's like, man, that's not a simple thing. I used to be part of that crew. I used to be in Arakesh, and to protect someone from their contract is nigh impossible. Like, you can stall it, maybe, but you cannot prevent it. And the king is like, name your price, man. Do the job, name your price. And Asher thinks it over, and he's like, all right. I will accept this job, and I have 2 conditions. 1, I want more or less an unlimited bank account with Stowhold, and that's like the trusted banking system throughout the 5 kingdoms. But don't worry, I'm not, I'm frugal. I'll only take a little bit when I need it, but I just want it when I need it. And the other thing he wants is 5 acres of pristine coastal land, and to build like a house, so on and so forth. Retirement plans, that's what he wants. And the king is like, yeah, bro, that's no problem. I can easily do that for you. And he's like, what else? And Asher's like, all right, man, if it's that simple, I also, because he's thinking of Darius de Vale here, he's like, I also want the 2 Greycoats that brought me here to come along with me on this detail. And I want to be in full command of all the Greycoats. I want to be in charge. And the king's like, yep, you got it, no problem. Oh man, I have to say, power move, bro. I love that. I want to be in charge of all the assholes that met me at the gate. And the cherry on top for this scene is we move over to Elaith and Nathaniel. They can't even stay in Velia. They have to go on the, the outer slums and find what they can for a poor porridge meal. The door opens up when they're about to dig into their gruel, and there's Darius DeVale, and he more or less is being forced to go up and tell Nathaniel that actually, bro, you are desperately needed on this mission because of how valiant you are. And he's gritting his teeth, hating it the whole time, glaring back at Asher, who is standing outside with a massive grin on his face, looking at Nathaniel like, yeah, I got your back, bro. I got your back. Kudos to that. I like that. But really quick, we're going to pass on over to the Elven ambassadorship where Reyna is talking to her guardian Phelan, and they're discussing the storm that's been going on for the entire start of the book, right? And they're discussing how they don't think it's a natural storm at this point. They're convinced that it's magically created and sustained by somebody that's out against them, because apparently they have like their own wizards, mages, sorcerers, whatever you want to call it, trying to counter the storm for their safe passage, but it's just not working. And normally that works. So they think this is actively being done. And they mention, like kind of under their breath, the mention of the cult of Valiness. And it's at this point that we also hear about the Echoes of Fate prophecy that this first 3 books is more or less based off of. And we don't hear the whole prophecy to begin with, but it is more or less the main political divide for modern day elves. You either believe in the prophecy and follow it like a religion almost, or you don't believe in it, so you take completely different views of current day society. And Reyna's main struggle is just that. The Echoes of Fate divides her parents. Her father does not believe in it whatsoever, where her mother is like a true believer. That's the whole reason her mother is in the southern jungles of Ada for this expedition. And her father is trying to mastermind this mental chess game of how he's gonna win everything, because he thinks the humans are a threat. He thinks that the humans are gonna undo the spell that time locks Ilithia, where Valiness, the Dark Elf, resides frozen in time. So he thinks he needs to like invade the human shores and stop that from happening. But she does not agree. Reyna is completely torn and she is not about it. But then we pan back over to Asher, who is now leading a company of roughly 20 individuals, including himself, Nathaniel, Elaith, the other Greycoats, and Galacris, the court mage for King Rengar. And when they have to stop and make camp for the first night as they travel along the coast north to try and meet up with the Elven ambassadors, Nathaniel is again trying to probe Asher for information about Nightfall. And he mentions that he knows that they can fight well in the dark and they're led by somebody called the Father. And Asher more or less says, you're close, but they don't just fight well in the dark. They're given something called the Night's Eye Elixir every single day up until the age of 25. So it's burned into their blood. And what the Night's Eye Elixir does is it makes it so anytime they are without their sight, say it's dark or they're blindfolded, so on and so forth, it enhances their other senses. The whole blind samurai thing, Daredevil style. So that's what the Night's Eye Elixir does. And after age of 25, it's permanent. So when they put on their blindfolds, it's not just them being edgy and cool. They literally get heightened senses and abilities. And he also says that yes, they're led by, quote, the Father, but it could also be a mother, depending on the generation, because they've been around a long time. And the father and or mother, actually, to ascend to that position, has to gouge out their own eyes, literally remove them from their head. So it's a permanent dedication to the Night's Eye Elixir. Something to also keep in mind is this is one of the first times that Asher has, so to speak, started to develop a friendship with someone. Like, he gets along with other rangers when they go out and do jobs, and he has a few that he favors over others, but actual friends are few to zero for Asher. He's not a very trusting guy, so him kind of warming up to Nathaniel is a little bit awkward, a little bit new for him. But you can tell he's putting in the effort because he gives Nathaniel what is called tallow spices. And if you ignite these spices, they act as almost like a flashbang grenade, if that makes sense. They produce a loud bang, a flash, and it's very disorienting. And tenfold for the Arakesh of Nightfall because they operate blindfolded using the Night's Eye elixir. So he tells him like, hey, you know the word for fire, right? Like you can conjure up at least like a tiny little flame to ignite this. And Nathaniel's like, yeah, I think I know the word, but I don't know how well I'll be able to do it. And Asher's like, well, when it's life or death, you'll find a way to light this kind of thing. And here is where we're kind of introduced to Makaris Tyon. Now, Makaris Tyon is descendant of Gal Tyon, the first human king in Ilion that went to war with the dragons. And back then, there was only one kingdom in Ilion. All of Ilion was under one kingdom, under Gal Tyon. But since then, 900 to 1,000 years later, it has devolved into 5 kingdoms, and they control the northern kingdom. It's the largest kingdom, and it's the coldest kingdom, but that is who Makaris Tyon is. They see his convoy traveling south on the road. They're headed to Velia so they can be there when the ambassadors, the elven ambassadors, arrive for the banquet. And they also make some gossip mention about Makaris's whole family supposedly dying in a very suspicious circumstance out at sea or somewhere far away. So, like, hint, hint, something's going on with that guy, but we'll get to that later. But right now, we actually get a real quick peek back to Adilandra and her southern expedition of Ada. And if you remember, last time we left off with her entire expedition was successfully ambushed and captured. So now she wakes up, she realizes she is in a spiked cage and she is being paraded through the Darkerkin capital city of Malaysai, and she is with her 3 remaining companions, Lurvana, Fallen, and Eteron. And eventually their parade ends them atop a massive pyramid centered in the city of Malaysai, which clearly doubles as a palace of sort for the quote-unquote goddess, who they now see sits upon a throne that's literally made of human remains and bone. And the goddess is absolutely brutal. I mean, as you would expect from more or less the grand leader of the Darkerkin. And she proceeds to taunt Adilandra. She tells her about how they've already captured 2 or 3 of her elves on their expedition. To the Darkerkin, elves are extremely exotic creatures. So to capture 1, 2, or even, 5 of them is a very big deal. And she tells her how one of them was named Tolvarn, and they passed them around from village to village, city to city, until she finally grew bored with them and cut their throat. She's really messed up, to paint the picture. At this point, the goddess addresses the massive Darkerkin that led them in through the parade, and apparently his name is Kinorak, and she tells Kinorak to take Eteron and just toss him over the side of the pyramid, which he does promptly. He whips that elf over the side of the pyramid. He falls hundreds of feet, I'm sure, straight to his death right in the busy streets, where the massive crowds proceed to then tear him apart limb from limb. She then tells Kinorak that Lurvana is actually going to be a gift to him for his great work at hunting down the remaining elves. So she throws one of them over the side of the pyramid to their death and to the peasants. She gives one of them as a gift to a massive savage, and then she takes the last one to herself. She pretty much tells Adilandra, oh, I'm gonna have fun with this one. And yes, mature content is heavily implied at this point as well. Everything to do with the Darkerkin also involves that element. But moving on, we actually learn at this point the whole purpose and reason for Adilandra to gather her expedition and travel south. The prophecy that divides the elven people that she believes in so much and her husband does not, she is trying to more or less jumpstart that prophecy, and she thinks if she can find the remaining dragons, the ones that flew off over 1,000 years ago when they had the war with Valinus, the Dark One, and then they left the continent of Ilion. The remaining dragons flew off, and she is now trying to find them because they are a linchpin in the prophecy to come. So the goddess knows exactly why she has come to the southern lands of Ada. She is seeking the dragons, and so right before she leaves the room and just leaves Adilandra in a darkness, still clamped in chains, she tells her, "Don't worry, I will let you see the dragons that you seek." And then she just shuts the door and leaves her to stew on that. And now we move back over to Asher and the Greycoats once again, and we just get a tidbit of information about Nathaniel's father right here. We learn he actually died while defending Snowfell, a small town, from a warband of outlanders. Apparently he held off like the entire warband before eventually dying to his wounds, and they have like a statue of him there that Nathaniel more or less avoids because it's kind of awkward for him. And at this point, their small talk gets cut short because they come across an obvious shipwreck on the shore, which is elven in nature. And that, it clicks in their head like, this must be the ambassador, and they shipwrecked. But they see there's signs of battle, but there's nobody there. And Asher, being the ranger that he is, and the Arakesh that he was, he finds tracks leading away from the boat into the nearby woods. So clearly they follow that. Asher, all the Greycoats, the court mage, and they eventually come across a clearing in the woods where there's like an old decrepit temple. And this clearing is where you find Reyna and Phelan defending an unconscious Morrigan Morgo from 8 Arakesh. And credit to Nathaniel because he's the first one to react. He rips his bow and fires off 2 or 3 shots. The Arakesh deflect the shots, but it gives Reyna an opening. And with her scimitar, she slashes one of them down the chest and pretty much eliminates that. So they're down to 7. And sure enough, Elaith gets immediately knocked to the ground, and as Nathaniel pivots to help her, he realizes Asher is already there, swings over and decapitates the Arakesh attacking Elaith. And the Arakesh that's fighting Nathaniel thinks he's slick, so he acrobatically jumps over Nathaniel's head using a 2 short sword swing that gets blocked by Reyna, as Nathaniel looks into her eyes like, dang, thanks girl. And when the Arakesh lands, Nathaniel proceeds to kick in his knee, then grab him by the head and snap his neck, all before looking directly into the Princess Reyna's eyes with a seductive stare down. And I definitely gotta give some credit to Nathaniel here because this is either the worst or the best time for a seductive stare down. Nathaniel then looks over to see that Asher is burying the spiked pommel of his sword into the skull of another Arakesh, while 2 Greycoats actually manage to kill an Arakesh before they themselves get cut down by a pair of Arakesh. And they say there's another 3 bodies of Greycoats on the ground. Darius de Vale is bleeding everywhere and barely standing. It's a bit of a massacre so far. The only group that isn't more or less backpedaling and bleeding is Phelan and Reyna, because they're still holding it down, guarding the downed Morrigan Morgo. He got shot with a tranq dart in the neck, that's his whole deal. I mean, Phelan herself is a force to be reckoned with. She cuts down one of the Arakesh while simultaneously launching another into a tree with a fireball, leaving him crispy on the ground, while Elaith and Nathaniel try to corner one of the 2 remaining Arakesh, and Nathaniel sees that crispy corpse still burning, so he throws the tallow spices that Asher gave him, and boom, they explode when they hit the fire. It causes a bang, a disorienting effect, and they're able to get the upper hand on their opponent. They look over and they see that Asher is actually saving Darius de Vale from the last remaining Arakesh, and Nathaniel rushes over to assist Asher right as he's taking a dagger to the shoulder, but they manage to get him and they finish off that last one. So after the last one is dead, Asher pulls the dagger out of his shoulder and tries to really discreetly heal his wound. He just kind of puts his hand over it and heals it with magic, but Nathaniel's always kind of paying attention to Asher at this point because he knows something's up. So he sees that. And if I'm not mistaken, Darius, Nathaniel, and Elaith are the only Greycoats that actually survive this encounter. I can't remember if the court mage lives or not. I'll have to check on that. But yeah, Asher pretty much saved their asses throughout the whole thing, and the elves were just fine on their own because they're elves, man. They're way better. So by this point, Morgan Morgo is awake and he's getting to his feet. He's a little groggy, but he is pissed off because through his eyes, this whole thing is a failing on the humans' part. They can't even land on human shores without being attacked, and the protection that is sent is meager at best in his opinion. But Reyna cuts him off and she expresses her gratitude for their assistance. Completely different tact going on there. But there is no time for debate, argument, or conversation because everybody freezes right where they're at because everyone can feel a dark presence, very close, moving closer. As they look over, they see a dark hooded figure coming out of the tree line. He's wearing like dull armor, but with really nice gold etchings, and he has a very ornate sword as well. And Asher thinks to himself, like, this is different. This is not an Arakesh. I do not recognize this, but this is a threatening presence. He instantly goes like full beast mode and rushes this hooded figure. And you'll come to find out, this is really common for Asher. He gets a vibe for his opponent's threat level almost immediately, and this one is off the charts to him. So he bum rushes him right away because he knows that he is like the only person in their group that has a chance of defeating this foe. I mean, the elves maybe, but he knows the Greycoats have no chance, and he doesn't even want them getting involved. So he bum rushes right away, and instantly he pulls out every maneuver that he can possibly think of. Everything he's learned, all his swordsmanship, he tries it all. And who I'm going to refer to as the Hood just matches him left and right. But the Hood is caught off guard by Asher. He is very surprised at what Asher is bringing to the table right now. So he actually lifts his hand, and with no wand, no staff, he uses a magic spell and casts almost like a force wave, and that wave decimates almost everything in front of the Hood except for Asher. To him, it's almost like a light breeze just went over his hair. And Asher realizes that the Hood is going to be stunned by this, so he takes the opportunity, he lifts his own hand and casts his own massive fireball, which launches the Hood back into the ruins that they were fighting around. And pretty much he rolls around on fire for a second until he eventually gets up and runs retreating through the woods. Still on fire, mind you. Everyone else watching this is of course more or less stunned, and Phelan, Reyna's main guardian, she mentions that, humans have clearly delved too deeply into magic for all this trouble that they're causing, more or less, because you have to keep in mind, elves have that really hardcore like superiority complex, like men are such a young and ignorant race, they barely know how to use magic, so when they do, they're just destructive, so on and so forth. The hardcore vibe, they're all like that. Well, okay, not all of them. Reyna's pretty down to earth, she's cool, but I'm getting off track here. Also, credit to Phelan because she fully noticed that the force wave just did not affect Asher, and she confronts him on that. She's like, how did you do that? And he, not wanting to answer the question, Asher just dodges it like a true politician. He's like, I'm being paid to get you back to Valia. That's what we're gonna do. Let's get moving. And at this point, the book is gonna take us back to Gideon and Abigail, who once again have gotten, well, I guess Gideon has gotten them into trouble, because whereas before it was the incident in the training class with the wands and staffs, now apparently they were walking past a group of like, I think third years or so, and they were more or less trying to climb a tree, and Gideon was like, oh, check it, I'll teach you the spell that denies gravity so you can just walk up the tree. And one of the kids fell and broke his arm, go figure. So now they're being disciplined for that now too, and Abigail is pissed. So she is not happy with Gideon at all. They're on their last year and he just keeps causing problems. So their punishment is to assist Master Tibid in checking and maintaining the magical defenses of Corcanith itself. And it's a big job. It's going to take until like 3 a.m. because Corcanith is a massive academy set on its own personal island. But Gideon, being the astute, learned scholar he is, asks, why do we need magical defenses when we have, supposedly the last dragon in existence guarding our borders, Goliath? He's magically enchanted to protect us, right? Why do we need these? And Master Tibid is like, oh, you're so observant, but what were to happen if somehow somebody were to get into, say, the library, before Maliath detected him. He would be magically bound to just plow through the entire academy to get that culprit. So we technically have his enchantment set, so he's more of a perimeter guard dog. So if you do manage to bypass him somehow, he doesn't go wrecking the academy trying to get to you. So he's only to protect the perimeter. Once you're inside, we take care of that. And as they're in Master Tibbet's study discussing this, Gideon looks over to see the Elder Book. And the Elder Book is best described as almost like the flower from Beauty and the Beast. Like, you see it and you instantly know that thing is important. It's like this massive grimoire spellbook tome that's like, I don't know, it's like floating and glistening or something like that, but it's clearly important. And Gideon is like, why is that just sitting in your study? Shouldn't that be like locked away somewhere? So Master Tibbet goes on to inform Gideon that yes, they used to keep their more highly valued artifacts at the vaults of Stohold, but ever since there was a couple heist attempts there, they have decided to, for now, reclaim their more delicate magical items. But you learn that that book, the Elder Book, is the thing that binds Maliath. So theoretically, if you got a hold of that book, you could either control and or set free Maliath, which, hint hint, plays a role in the grander story. At this point, everything is going to start to coalesce. The beginning of the first book is more or less getting your ingredients for the recipe. You know, you're introduced to the characters, where everybody stands, a couple locations, and a few tidbits about this and that. But now it's going to start to coalesce. Now we're going to start mixing, chopping, and putting everything together. And that begins with Galanor and his crew are finally just going to stick it out and take what they need, because they're done playing games, and Galanor can't afford to lose any more face with his elven crew, because they're out for blood. They want to get this done. So what they do, they can't buy the women and children that they need for the mermen for passage. So what he does is, a simple way of putting it, he attacks one of the family brothels, because there's 5 criminal families. He attacks one of their brothels, and because he's an elf and he's so fast, he literally goes in there, and in a matter of seconds, he murders like 2 or 3 people, and then shouts the name of a rival house family, like, you know, it was for them, and then bolts, which obviously they pursue him. He leads them all the way back to that rival family's casino, where he busts in the door, he kills 2 or 3 of that guy's name, and then boasts the previous crime family. So he's literally just sicking 2 crime families on each other and causing a large commotion. While he does this, his other operatives are in the brothel, and they are taking the women and children that they need. And they do that successful mission. People die, but they get out of their clean slate, and they make it to the shore, where they meet up with the mermen again. They hand over the women and children, and it sinks in. Galanor is like, man, this is it. I'm officially handing over women and children to these mermen that I know have no good intentions for them. I kind of feel for Galanor, I'll be honest, because if you know the deeper why he's doing this and what's at stake, which you will eventually, we'll get there, but it's conflicting, because he's one of the few elves that does not want to do this. Most of them are bloodthirsty. He is not, but he's gotta. So he does it, and he just looks back like, I am gonna regret this. But this is a huge moment here, because he looks to his crew as they're getting prepared to take off for Corcanith, because that's where the mermen are going to take them. They're going to Corcanith. He says, let's get ready to free a dragon. So that gives us another puzzle piece that we can use to start building the border for the picture we're trying to paint here, that is the plot and the story that's going on here. For the humans, it's like something good is happening, because for the first time ever, they're going to get to interact with elves, and they know that elves are more or less a superior race with way more knowledge than them. So they're looking to benefit this. This is going to help them. It's a great thing going forward, while the elves are thinking the complete opposite, like dark times are ahead. So the main issue issue that everybody's trying to fix right now is 1,000 years ago, the elves lived on the continent of Ilion, and they had a massive civil war, and they fought against the Dark Elf, as he's called. His name was Valiness, and Valiness, supposedly, he spoke to the gods, and the gods told him he needed to do X, Y, Z, which was some pretty chaotic shit. And so it caused a civil war, and they just barely squeezed out a win against Valiness because the dragons teamed up with the elves, and the dragons combined their magic with the elven magic, and they managed to cast a massive time stop spell on the entire city of Elethia, where the final siege was happening, and they time froze Valiness the Dark Elf. Now, 1,000 years later, after they've migrated to the east on the continent of Ada and created a whole new civilization for themselves, they think that the rising humans on Ilion they're gonna break that spell. They think the humans are bound to interfere with the ruins of Elethia. They're gonna break the spell, and they're gonna free the Dark Lord Valiness, and then we're gonna have a huge problem on our hands. So that's what people are trying to prevent here as far as the elves go. The Elven King is making his personal moves to what he thinks he needs to do to prevent that, while the Elven Queen is relying on a prophecy that's about 1,000 years old, actually, that says XYZ are gonna happen, and as long as these things happen, everything will work out. So half the population believes that, half of them do not. It all starts coming together. It gets good. If you've been with me this long, I appreciate it. Do the like, do the subscribe, all that jazz, and we will catch up next time on part 5.